Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're decoding how the visual identity of Indian architecture isn't just some static collection of old buildings. It's actually a living, breathing timeline. The history of India is written directly into its stone, its spires, and its empires. Let's get right into it.
Have you ever stood in front of a massive Indian monument and just felt like you were looking at a collision of completely different empires? Seriously, picture it. You look up and you get this bizarre but absolutely beautiful sense that you're standing in three different worlds, all at the exact same time. It's like a giant visual puzzle, and today we're going to solve it.
Here's the chronological recipe for our explainer. We'll be looking at the three-world skyline, India's ancient foundations, the first great fusion, the British power move, and finally, the birth of Indo-Saracenic architecture.
We're essentially going on a time travel journey. We'll start in the ancient era, which spans thousands of years, move into the medieval period over centuries, and finish up in the colonial era, spanning just decades. Every single distinct era layered onto the last one to create something totally new.
Section 1. The three-world skyline, a visual puzzle.
So what makes this skyline so uniquely perplexing? Well, in a single view, you might see a pointed Islamic arch, and right next to it, sitting perfectly seamlessly, is a stone carving that looks like it belongs on an ancient Hindu temple. And the kicker? The whole thing is wrapped in a structural shell that feels exactly like a classical British civic office. You're not imagining things. This collision is very real, and it's the result of massive socioeconomic shifts.
To understand how we arrived at this fusion, we've got to start with the baseline. Section 2. India's ancient foundations. For thousands of years, India was defined purely by its ancient, indigenous styles. These were the absolute bedrock of its visual identity. I mean, before any kind of fusion could even happen, there had to be a masterclass foundation, right? And in India, that was built on an awe-inspiring mastery of rock and stone.
What's truly staggering here is just the sheer scale of that early craftsmanship. We are talking about the incredible rock-cut caves of Ajanta, literally carved straight into mountainsides, alongside these towering Nagara and Dravida temples. These foundational structures feature the highly complex sacred geometry of the Garbhagriha, that's the innermost sanctum, and the pillared halls known as mandapas. These builders essentially wrote the very first draft of India's architectural DNA.
Let's move to the medieval period and see how this evolves into something new. Section 3. The first great fusion. Okay, this is the exact moment everything changed. On one hand, you have builders arriving from Central Asia and Persia, bringing entirely new structural blueprints, like the sweeping dome and the elegant arch. But they're handing these blueprints over to Indian craftsmen who have literally spent generations perfecting intricate stone carving. So what actually happens when imported geometry meets local mastery?
You get Indo-Islamic architecture. It was this beautiful blend of both worlds, an aesthetic that wasn't strictly Islamic, but wasn't strictly Hindu either. The conquerors brought their visions, sure, but in a way, they were ultimately conquered by Indian art. The local craftsmen totally absorbed the new styles and then executed them using their own materials and their own decorative motifs.
The Mughals were absolute masters of this specific fusion. They completely, seamlessly blended Persian aesthetics with Indian materials to create total masterpieces. If you want proof of this in the real world, look no further than the Qutb Minar, or, of course, the world-renowned Taj Mahal. These aren't just buildings, They're physical records of two vastly different cultures harmonizing into a single, breathtaking skyline.
But hey, history never stands still. Fast forward to the arrival of European powers, where architecture became a strategic tool for establishing authority. Section 4. The British power move.
Multiple European powers, the Dutch, the Portuguese, the French, the English, they all arrived and left their mark. Now, initially, they just imported classical Western prototypes straight over from Europe. But let's be real, a dreary European box doesn't exactly command respect in a culturally rich and incredibly hot landscape. The British quickly realized they needed to shake things up.
To rule effectively, they had to speak the local language of power. The British figured out they couldn't just force European styles onto the Indian landscape and expect unquestioned authority. No way. To be seen as legitimate rulers by the local population, they needed to adopt the local architectural language. They essentially needed to borrow from the grandeur of the empires that came before them.
This historical realization leads us right to the climax of our explainer, Section 5, Birth of Indo-Saracenic.
Indo-Saracenic architecture was a deliberate, wild cocktail. It took the modern utility of Western structural engineering and mashed it up with both Hindu and Islamic decorative features. It was a completely hybrid colonial identity designed to feel foreign and familiar at the exact same time. The British were basically saying, hey, we have the modern engineering, but we're also claiming the historical majesty of India's past.
In practice, the British used this Indo-Saracenic style to construct massive, utilitarian buildings. We aren't talking about temples or mosques here. We're talking about places like the Goli Market in New Delhi, the sprawling ornate railway stations in Mumbai, and the grand post offices of Chennai. They took the arches, the domes, the stone carvings, and just plastered them onto train stations, turning everyday civic structures into these grand monuments of imperial synthesis.
Let's quickly summarize these incredible layers of history. We start with the ancient era, defined by sacred geometry and rock-cut caves like Ajanta. Then, the medieval era brings in domes and arches, beautifully fused with stone carving, giving us the Taj Mahal. And finally, the colonial era brings Western structures infused with local fusion, yielding utilitarian marvels like the Goli Market. The land of India basically absorbed every conquering style and synthesized it into something entirely new.
Ultimately, what this explainer proves is that history isn't just confined to the dusty pages of textbooks. No, it is physically recorded in the stone and mortar of the buildings we walk past every single day. The Indian identity is a layered masterpiece, a real testament to socioeconomic shifts, brilliant craftsmen, and the relentless march of time.
I want to leave you with this provocative thought as we wrap up today. We've seen how ancient builders, Mughal emperors, and British colonists all left their distinct cultural and political fingerprints on the skyline. So, as we continue to build our modern world of glass, steel, and concrete, what exactly will our own contemporary skylines say about us 1,000 years from now? What story of power, fusion, and culture are we writing in our cities today? Keep that in mind the next time you look up. Thanks so much for learning with me today.